I see you're feeling stuck right now. Maybe you've been waiting for something to shift, for clarity to come, for a door to open that's remained shut for longer than you thought you could bear. And I want to start by saying this: I know you're tired. Not just tired in the way sleep might fix, but tired in the way that comes from holding your breath too long, from scanning the horizon for signs that never quite arrive in the form you expected. You're not wrong for feeling this way. When life slows to a crawl and nothing visible is changing, the mind does what it's designed to do: it searches for explanations, for patterns, for reasons why the movement has stopped. And in that searching, you might have started to wonder if you're being punished, if you've done something wrong, if the universe has forgotten you exist. That's a lonely place to stand, and I'm not going to tell you it isn't. But I want to offer you a different way of seeing this moment. Not because the way you're seeing it now is incorrect, but because there might be another angle that feels less like drowning and more like treading water until your strength returns. What if waiting isn't the absence of progress? What if it's not a void where nothing happens, but rather a very specific kind of something, a stabilizing phase that your whole system needs before the next chapter can even begin to write itself? I know that might sound like a gentle excuse for disappointment. It might sound like I'm asking you to be patient when patience is the one thing you've run out of. So let me be clear: I'm not asking you to be anything other than exactly what you are right now. Exhausted. Frustrated. Maybe even a little bit angry at how slow everything feels. Those feelings don't need to be fixed or transformed. They just need to be seen for what they are: the natural response to being in a long stretch of stillness when you desperately want motion. Think about the moment after you've been running for too long. Not the satisfying kind of running where you feel strong and capable, but the kind where you've been fleeing something or chasing something and your lungs are burning and your legs are shaking. When you finally stop, there's this moment where your body doesn't immediately recover. It trembles. Your heart pounds. Everything in you wants to either keep running or collapse completely. That in-between space, where you're neither moving forward nor fully at rest, is uncomfortable. It feels vulnerable. And yet it's necessary. Your whole system is doing something crucial in that moment. It's recalibrating. It's bringing your heart rate back down to something sustainable. It's processing what just happened and preparing you to move again when the time is right. But if you tried to sprint again immediately, before that stabilization happened, you'd collapse. The pause isn't optional. It's protective. I think that's where you might be right now. In the pause that feels like punishment but is actually protection. Not protection from something you've done wrong, but protection from moving forward before you're genuinely ready to carry what comes next. And I know that doesn't make it feel any less frustrating. Because when you're in the middle of it, all you can see is what's not happening. The relationship that hasn't formed or healed. The opportunity that hasn't arrived. The clarity that remains cloudy. The purpose that feels distant. When you look at your life from the inside of this waiting period, it can feel like a sentence with no release date. But here's what I've noticed about these periods: when they're viewed from the other side, after they've passed, they weren't empty. They might have felt empty, but something was happening beneath the surface that couldn't have happened any other way. Something was settling that needed to settle. Something was releasing that needed to release. Some old pattern was finally loosening its grip, so slowly that you couldn't feel it happening day by day, but unmistakably present when you look back with enough distance. You might not believe that right now, and that's okay. You don't have to believe it for it to be true. Your disbelief doesn't stop the process any more than your impatience speeds it up. Let me tell you what happens when we fight the waiting. When we decide that stillness is intolerable and we have to force something, anything, to happen just to prove we're not stuck. We start chasing signs. We ask the universe, or fate, or God, or whatever name we give to the forces we can't control, we ask for a signal that we're on the right path. Show me something. Give me a hint. Let me know I'm not wasting my time here. And here's the trap: when you're desperate enough, everything starts to look like a sign. A song on the radio. A conversation overheard in a coffee shop. A license plate. A dream. And for a moment, there's this rush of relief. See, something is happening, something means something. But then you have to interpret it. You have to figure out what it's telling you to do. And because signs by nature are ambiguous, you end up more confused than you were before. Or worse, you take action based on a sign that was never meant to be a directive, and you find yourself even further from the clarity you were seeking. Chasing signs is exhausting because it puts you in a constant state of vigilance. You're always scanning, always interpreting, always trying to decode messages that may or may not exist. It's like trying to read meaning into the shapes of clouds. You can do it, certainly. You can find faces and animals and symbols. But the clouds weren't shaped by intention. They're just water vapor responding to temperature and pressure and wind. They don't know you're watching. They don't have messages encoded in their formations. And the more you chase, the more anxious you become, because what if you missed the sign? What if it already came and you didn't recognize it? What if your next decision is the wrong one because you misread what you were supposed to see? This is what I mean when I say that waiting isn't the problem, fighting the waiting is. The waiting itself, the stillness, the lack of obvious movement, that's just a phase. It's neutral. It doesn't mean anything about your worth or your future. It's just where you are right now. But when you fight it, when you thrash against it and demand that it end immediately and give you clear instructions for what to do next, that's when the suffering multiplies. So what if you stopped fighting? Not forever. Not as a permanent surrender to a life of stagnation. But just for today. Just for this moment. What if you let yourself be exactly where you are without needing it to mean something or lead somewhere or resolve into clarity by tonight? I'm not saying give up on what you want. I'm not saying stop caring about your dreams or your healing or your relationships or your purpose. I'm saying stop demanding that they reveal themselves on your timeline. Stop treating every day that passes without obvious progress as evidence that you're failing or forgotten. Because here's what happens when you stop fighting, you stop spending all your energy on anxiety. And that energy, that precious resource that's been going toward worry and interpretation and sign chasing, it becomes available for something else. For rest. For small joys. For noticing what's actually here instead of what's missing. For stabilizing. Think of water. When water is turbulent, when it's churning and full of sediment and debris, you can't see through it. It's cloudy. Chaotic. If you try to use that water for anything, to see your reflection, to drink, to water something that needs to grow, it wouldn't work. The turbulence makes it useless for its purpose. But if you let the water sit, if you stop stirring it and stop adding to the chaos and just let it be still, something happens. The sediment settles. The debris sinks or floats away. The water clears. And it's not that the water did anything active. It didn't try to become clear. It just stopped moving long enough for gravity to do what gravity does. You are the water right now. And all this waiting, all this stillness that feels like torture, it's allowing things to settle that need to settle. Old hurts. Old patterns. Old ideas about who you are and what you're capable of. They're sinking. They're clearing out. Not because you're working on them every moment, but because you've finally stopped churning long enough for the natural process to happen. And I know that's not satisfying to hear. Because it means you can't force it. You can't speed it up. You can't add more effort and get faster results. The only thing that works is the one thing you don't want to do: wait. Be still. Let it happen. But here's what I want you to understand: letting it happen isn't the same as doing nothing. Stabilizing is an active process, even though it looks passive from the outside. Your body is stabilizing. Your nervous system is stabilizing. Your sense of self is stabilizing. And all of that takes energy. It takes time. It takes the kind of patience that doesn't feel like a virtue but like a burden. You might be thinking, but how long? How long until something changes? And I can't answer that because I don't know. No one knows. And that uncertainty is part of why this is so hard. If you knew that in 3 months something would shift, you could endure these 3 months. You could mark the days on a calendar and count down. But you don't get that certainty. You get today, and then another today, and then another, with no clear endpoint in sight. So what do you do with that? You stop asking how long and start asking what now. Not what next. Not what eventually. Just what now. What does this moment need from you? And most of the time, the answer is simpler than you think. This moment needs you to breathe. To drink water. To step outside for 5 minutes. To let yourself feel sad without making it mean something catastrophic. To do one small thing that doesn't require hope or faith or certainty about the future. You're allowed to be here without having it figured out. You're allowed to not know what's coming next. You're allowed to feel stuck without treating stuckness as a moral failing. Let me say that again because I think you need to hear it. Feeling stuck is not a moral failing. It's not evidence that you're not trying hard enough or believing hard enough or healing fast enough. It's just a phase. A stabilizing phase. And phases, by definition, are temporary. They don't last forever, even when they feel like they will. I want you to think about the longest night you've ever experienced. Maybe it was a night of physical pain or emotional anguish. Maybe it was a night where you couldn't sleep and the darkness felt suffocating and every minute stretched into an hour. In that night, it felt permanent. It felt like morning would never come, even though intellectually you knew it would. The knowing didn't make the waiting easier. The knowing didn't shorten the night. But morning came anyway. Not because you earned it or because you waited perfectly or because you finally found the right thought that made the sun rise. Morning came because that's what morning does. It comes after night. Every single time. Without exception. You're in the night right now. And I'm not going to tell you that morning is coming soon because I don't know when it's coming for you. But I can tell you this, you don't have to be okay with the night for morning to arrive. You don't have to be grateful for the darkness. You don't have to find the lesson or the gift or the silver lining. You just have to be in it. And that's enough. Your presence here, in this difficult stretch, that's enough. I think one of the cruelest things we do to ourselves when we're waiting is we tell ourselves that we should be using this time better. We should be learning something. Growing something. Becoming someone new. And yes, sometimes that happens naturally. Sometimes waiting does produce growth as a byproduct. But making that the goal, making personal development the thing you're supposed to achieve while you wait, that just adds another layer of pressure to an already heavy experience. What if the only thing you're supposed to do right now is get through it? What if not falling apart completely is actually the achievement? What if maintaining some small thread of connection to yourself and to life, even when everything feels pointless, what if that's the work? Because it is work. Staying present when you want to escape. Staying gentle with yourself when you want to be harsh. Staying here when here is uncomfortable and uncertain and seemingly endless. That takes strength. It takes a kind of courage that doesn't announce itself or earn recognition. It's the quiet courage of simply continuing. And maybe you don't feel courageous. Maybe you feel weak and tired and like you're barely holding on. But holding on counts. Getting up even when you don't want to counts. Moving through the day even when the day feels meaningless counts. You're doing more than you think you are. I want to pause here and let something settle. There's no rush. Nothing needs to be resolved in the next 5 minutes or the next 5 hours. You don't have to figure anything out before you go to sleep tonight. You don't have to wake up tomorrow with a new perspective or renewed energy. You can wake up tomorrow feeling exactly the same way you feel right now, and that won't mean anything has gone wrong. It will just mean you're still in the waiting. Still in the stabilizing. Still in the process that doesn't care about your timeline or your preferences. And I know that's not comforting in the way you want comfort. You want someone to tell you that everything will change. That breakthrough is coming. That your patience will be rewarded. But I can't tell you that because I don't know if it's true. I don't know what your specific future holds. No one does. What I can tell you is that you will not always feel exactly the way you feel right now. Not because I have special knowledge, but because nothing stays the same. Feelings shift. Circumstances shift. You shift, even when you can't feel yourself shifting. The person you'll be a year from now will have perspective you don't have today. They'll understand things about this waiting period that you can't understand while you're in it. But you can't rush to become that person. You can only be who you are today, and let tomorrow's version of you emerge when it's ready. This is the season you're in. And seasons don't change because you're impatient with them. Winter doesn't end sooner because you're tired of the cold. Spring doesn't arrive faster because you've been waiting for it. The earth doesn't care about your frustration. It has its own rhythm, its own timing, and it moves through its cycles whether you approve or not. You are part of that larger rhythm, whether you feel connected to it or not. You are part of a cycle that includes growth and dormancy, action and rest, clarity and confusion. Right now you're in dormancy. In the fallow time. In the season where nothing visible is happening but everything necessary is happening beneath the surface. And maybe you're thinking, but I don't want to be in dormancy. I want to be in the growing season. I want to be in the harvest. And I understand that. Everyone wants to be in harvest. No one wakes up hoping for a fallow field. But the field doesn't produce forever. It can't. If you tried to force it to grow year-round without rest, the soil would deplete. The field would stop giving. The dormancy isn't optional. It's how the field recovers its capacity to grow again when the time is right. You are the field. And this waiting, this stillness, this frustrating lack of visible growth, it's how you recover your capacity. You can't see it happening. You can't feel it most days. But it's happening anyway. Your system is restoring itself. Your energy is rebuilding. Your clarity is gestating in the dark where you can't track its progress. Nothing is wrong. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're not being punished. You're stabilizing. And stabilizing looks like nothing from the outside, but it's everything from the inside. Let me offer you a small thought to sit with, not as an instruction but as a possibility. What if, just for today, you stopped waiting for something to change and started noticing what's already here? Not in a forced gratitude way. Not in a toxic positivity way. But in a simple observation way. The temperature of the air. The feeling of your feet on the ground. The fact that you're breathing without having to think about it. The presence of this moment, exactly as it is, without needing it to be different. You don't have to like this moment. You don't have to be at peace with it. You just have to notice that it's here, and that you're here in it, and that for right now, that's all that's required. Because here's what I've learned about these long stretches of waiting: they don't end because you've finally learned the right lesson or achieved the right level of acceptance. They end when they end. And trying to force the ending, trying to graduate early from the waiting period, that just extends it. Not because you're being punished for trying, but because the trying keeps you agitated. It keeps the water churning. It prevents the settling that needs to happen. So what would it feel like to stop trying? Just for a little while. Just for today. To let yourself be in this without needing to fix it or understand it or transcend it. To let the waiting be what it is, uncomfortable, frustrating, sometimes unbearable, without adding the layer of judgment that says you shouldn't feel this way. You should feel this way. You're a person experiencing uncertainty and stagnation and the ache of unfulfilled longing. Of course you feel frustrated. Of course you feel exhausted. Of course you want it to be different. Those feelings aren't evidence of weakness. They're evidence that you're human and you're here and you're paying attention. And maybe that's enough for today. To just be human. To just be here. To just pay attention, even when what you're paying attention to is difficult. You don't have to transform it. You don't have to rise above it. You just have to be with it, the way you'd be with a friend who's going through something hard. You wouldn't tell your friend to hurry up and feel better. You wouldn't tell them they're taking too long to heal. You'd just sit with them. You'd let them feel what they feel. You'd remind them that they're not alone. So let me remind you, you're not alone in this. Not because I'm here, though I am. But because this experience of waiting, of feeling stuck, of wondering if anything will ever change, this is part of being alive. It's part of everyone's story at some point. You're not uniquely cursed. You're not being singled out. You're just in a hard chapter. And hard chapters are still chapters. They still count as part of the story. One day, you'll look back at this time and you'll remember how difficult it was. You'll remember the weight of it, the endlessness of it. But you'll also see things you can't see now. You'll see how something was shifting beneath the surface. How you were becoming someone slightly different, even though the change was too slow and too subtle to perceive while it was happening. You'll see that the waiting wasn't wasted, even though it felt that way. But you don't have access to that perspective yet. So you can't use it to comfort yourself today. All you have is today, and today is hard, and that's just the truth of it. What I can offer you is this: you don't need to have hope right now. You don't need to believe that things will get better. You don't need to trust the process or find meaning in the struggle or any of the other things people say when they're trying to make difficulty feel purposeful. You just need to continue. And continuing doesn't require hope. It just requires the next breath, and then the one after that. If all you do today is survive the day, that's not a small thing. That's actually everything. Because survival is what keeps you here long enough for the phase to pass. And it will pass, not because you earned it or because you waited perfectly, but because phases pass. That's what they do. So here's what I want to leave you with as we come to the end of this time together. You don't need to feel any different when we finish. You don't need to have gained a new perspective or achieved a breakthrough. If you feel exactly the same as when we started, that's completely okay. This isn't about fixing you. It's about sitting with you in the place you actually are, instead of the place you wish you were. Nothing has to happen today for you to be okay. No decision has to be made. No clarity has to arrive. No sign has to appear. Today can just be today, difficult, slow, uncertain, and you can move through it without it meaning anything about tomorrow or next week or your whole future. The waiting is not a punishment. It's a phase. A stabilizing phase. Your system is doing something important even though you can't see it or feel it. Trust that or don't trust it. Believe it or don't believe it. Either way, the process continues. Either way, you're exactly where you need to be, even though where you are is uncomfortable. And maybe tomorrow will feel a little lighter. Or maybe it won't. Maybe next week will bring some clarity. Or maybe it won't. You can't control that. All you can control is whether you're kind to yourself in the meantime. Whether you let yourself be human. Whether you allow this to be hard without making it mean that you're doing something wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just here. In the waiting. In the stillness. In the long, slow middle of something that hasn't resolved yet. And that's okay. You're okay. Not because everything is fine, but because being okay doesn't require everything to be fine. It just requires you to be present, even when presence is difficult. So breathe. Let your shoulders drop if they're tense. Notice that you made it through today, or most of today, or at least this moment. Notice that you're still here, still trying, still present, even when presence feels like too much to ask. That's enough. You're enough. Right here, right now, in the middle of the waiting, you're enough.